Bet you're wondering what I'm going to say. I'm wondering the same thing myself. 4th of July. It's about the freedom, the birth of the idea of freedom in the United States. And I want to go back to when our forefathers birthed the idea. And they birthed the idea of the pursuit of happiness. But they birthed it even deeper than that. They birthed the idea freedom for the pursuit of happiness. They were leaving behind, think about when they were here, they were leaving behind all of the religions, all of the politics, all of the economics, everything that was part of the European structure. These people were the outcasts, so to speak, or they were the leading edge, so to speak. They were thinkers of new thought that didn't fit in with the existing society in which they were. So they came to this country with one idea and one idea only: freedom to pursue happiness in our own unique way, with no restrictions, with no boundaries, with no rules saying we can't do that. And so they created this idea that we would come together in that freedom and learn to do it in a cooperative way, honoring all. Now, that was a great idea. But somehow it's changed. It's really changed. And I saw this very clearly at the conference I was asked when I listened to one of the faculty there bring up the idea, and he was talking about the idea of manufactured consent. And it's a whole psychological approach that is studied by businesses, by philosophers, by psychologists. And what they do is they take an idea and they manufacture consent around that idea, and they keep perpetrating it over and over and over again. And then the masses, who basically are sheeple, because they're not leaders, they're followers, they buy into this idea, and now there's manufacturing consent to what we are living. And what we know at Agape is we know darn well that our thoughts create. It is our mental atmosphere that is drawing to us the experience. So if we're buying into a manufactured consent, what are we buying into and what are we attracting into our lives? And so let's go to this idea of the American dream. The American dream that people seem to have right now of we live in the suburbs and we have our beautiful home and we have our two cars and we have our 2.2 children and we belong to this country club and that country club and we have this gift and that gift and there's a coffee pot and a microwave and all of this stuff. Let's really break that down. Why was that dream created? It was created in the early 50s. Do you know why it was created? Because we had just come off of World War II. World War II took us out of the Great Depression. Because what happened is, with World War II, we became a manufacturing machine of war equipment. And so people got back to work. All that unemployment that we had in the country disappeared, and they built up this manufacturing machine that brought all this stuff, so people had jobs. Well, now that there's no war, what do? Brilliance came in and said, let's create this American dream. Let's create this idea where people buy things and we'll start building the economy around a consumer idea. Now, think about that idea. That idea is actually prison if you bought into it and you didn't consciously choose to do so. Because you're sitting here judging yourself about your status in life based on a dream that was created for the purpose of having you buy things. So the idea is, have you been living by manufactured consent that came from outside of yourself? Keep in mind now, let's take this even further because I'm really going to push the envelope on you today. What is our school system teaching? It's teaching our children, or it taught me as one of those children. It taught my children. It's teaching children beyond, lower than that, how to fit into a system that's supporting that American dream. So what does that system do? It does not teach you how to think. It teaches you what to think. So I really want to embody this idea that what we do at Agape, we don't teach you what to think, ever. We tell you, doubt everything that's ever said at Agape. Question everything with your dying breath. Question it all the time, all the time, all the time. But find out what works for you. But question it. So I really want to come back to this idea of unconditional love for ourselves and others, because that's the dream. Let's break down what is unconditional love. I'm going to go back to a biblical verse where Jesus basically in the New Testament said there are 2 commandments. He said, love God above all else and love thy neighbor as thyself. So let's look at that. What is this idea of love? Do you go out and hug God? Give God kisses? No, what you do to love God is you look at all of life and you realize that all of life is perfect. All of life is in balance. All of life is supporting itself. How can we have trillions of stars and galaxies that are in harmony, that there's a perfect order of how things flow? Yes, there will be planets exploding or stars running out, but it's part of the balance of life. In our human form, there's also balance. People die and people are birthed. People are sick, people heal. It's part of the whole process. But can you look at life and appreciate it? Can you look at life and accept it? Can you look at life and be thankful for it? Because until we do, we're not loving God. So let's take that down a step. God is infinite, all-knowing, everywhere present, always has been, always will be, constantly creating and recreating itself out of itself in each and every moment. If that's the case, then we are the individualizations of God. We are that point of consciousness within God that is here to express freely, completely, and easily and effortlessly. So if we are that point of consciousness, that means that the power to create, and I really want to break it down from a quantum physics standpoint, because quantum physics says everything exists now. It exists everywhere. It's everywhere present. It's always present. It will always be present. However, it only is seen or experienced by us as we focus upon it. So we don't really create anything. We're just simply shifting our mental focus. And when we mentally focus on something, it becomes our experience. So if we've lost a loved one, and we focus on the loss of the loved one, we will be in pain the rest of our lives. But if we focus on the loss of a loved one and the love that they brought into our life and how they opened up our heart wider, how as they opened up our heart wider, we got a deeper clarity. And with that clarity, we now could be in the world and express and experience love greater than we could before. And realizing that it's all God, that we could attract another relationship, whether it's familiar or whether it's romantic, into our lives, and we can take love to a higher level. Is that death not a blessing? So we're looking at it through God's eyes. So we've got to be able now to look at ourselves and see ourselves as perfect. See ourselves that we are creating a raising of consciousness. And we have to accept ourselves as we are. We have to embrace our paths and give thanks for it. We have to be in the world authentically. Here's a line that I heard. If you are not standing as your unique self in the world, you are invisible. Think about that. If you are not being your unique self, you are truly invisible. So when I was at this conference that I was talking about last week, I want you to know I was unique. And I want you to know that I was very visible. There were other people unique and very visible. There are other people that it took time for them to step into their authenticity and become visible. And I want to say to you that the idea of loving thy neighbor is that when you see someone who is not yet authentic, not living themselves, how can you support their authenticity in coming forward? I remember sitting, as part of this, there were classes that we went to, and then there would be meals, and meals would be 2 hours, and you would sit at a table with one of the faculty. So there'd be 4 or 5 of you at a table with a faculty member, and the meals lasted 2 hours. So you literally got the faculty member to drill down into whatever your business was, and how do you expand, explore, create from that. And I remember watching this woman over here. She was from another country, and she spoke very broken English. And she had a business where she bought and sold businesses. And she had people working for her, but I didn't understand how this could be. I'm in my own mind, right? I'm judging based on my perceptions. Are you hearing me? I'm laying that out for you. Because what I didn't understand is if you're buying and selling businesses, but your English is broken, how does that happen? And so in my uniqueness and not shyness, as we finished the lunch, I went over to her and I started talking to her. I said, so I'm not understanding. Can you tell me what's going on? I'm feeling a disconnect. And she looked me in the eyes and said this. I wasn't involved in the business until 3 months ago. And 3 months ago, my husband died. He was the leader of the business, so now I must take over. That shifted everything. It shifted everything because now all I could do is I took her aside and I prayed with her. Didn't know her name. I didn't even know her name, but I prayed with her that she got the clarity. You could see her start to shift. And then she was there, and I went up to a couple professors, and I said, I want you to give this person some extra time because they are not telling you this, but they lost the loved one. And they're trying to do something new. And all of a sudden, you saw this woman who was this little mouse. I'm talking about mouse from the standpoint of expressing her uniqueness or authenticity. All of a sudden, you saw her chest come out. You saw her start to ask questions. You could see a shift in her. Because you see, I learned such a valuable lesson that I had been judging her based on where I was coming from. I didn't know where she was coming from until I asked. I couldn't accept her for who she was. And I'll guarantee you that's true of about everyone in this room, that we truly don't really know each other. The thing I want to challenge you with is be authentic. Don't ever try to make someone happy at the expense of being yourself. The second you become authentic, you become what you perceive as authentic at the expense of for someone else, guess what? Nobody sees you. Ever been in a relationship? Don't raise your hands, I'll do it for you. Ever been in a relationship where the person has asked you, if you do this, I'll be happy? And then you've shifted and you become that and it was friggin' miserable? Because you were never meant to be anything but yourself. And we have this emotional guidance system within us that is always there leading us, that when we're off track about being our authentic self, when we're going against the very grain of everything that we are, the emotions come in and they slap us. And here's something that I understand really clear. If we don't get the lesson, it turns up the dial. It turns up the dial. It turns up the dial. So let's look at this. This was one of the best things I got at CEO Space, and it was in a private consult with a magnificent professor there by the name of Dr. David Gruder. So I want to make sure he has credit for this because it's not Lee. I asked him, how do I deal with the aspect that I teach, non-judgment and non-attachment, and yet I have attachment to some things in politics, I have attachment to certain views about Wall Street, and I have attachment to GMOs and the health things. How do I deal with that? And David said, well, let's break it down. And he went into a really wonderful definition. He said, let's break it down into 2 things. Let's break it down into the metaphysical over here. And from the metaphysical standpoint, it's real easy. Cause and effect. You always know in the metaphysical, there's always a cause, and with that cause, there's an effect. So you don't deal with it. Right? If GMOs are harmful, I don't know if they are. I have a belief on that. But if GMOs are harmful, you have nothing to worry about because there's an effect, and you follow what you want to do with it, and you'll have the effect or not. Or let's come over to this side, which is the psychological. So the metaphysical is the spiritual side, right? But we don't really live there all that often. Can I get an amen on that? We're living in the psychological or the human side, correct? In the human side, there's two ways that you can look at this. You can look at it from the standpoint of judgment, and not really judgment, but judgment from the standpoint of shame and blame, or you can look at it from the standpoint of discernment. So this is where I got clarity. No matter what you're doing, no matter how hard you try, you will always be judging. The question is, which type of judgment are you using? If you're there and you're using discernment, you can say, based on the research that I've done, based on my testing it, based on the way my body feels, I will eat this way, and that's all I'm concerned with. That's discernment. Now, I'm not passing that on to anyone, but if I were to get up and talk about it, I would present it very factually, let everyone make their choice, have no attachment whatsoever to how they use it, okay? We understand that, right? Discernment. Then we've got the one where there's blame and shame. Well, if you don't do this, well, friggin' you're going to die. And if you don't do this, this is going to happen. There's a lot of blame and shame in that. And I said, well, how do I get over that? How do I look at that? And he says, you know. He says, Lee, you're too bright not to know. And I thought for a second. And I says, is it because whether it's individual or collective consciousness, it has to have its own lesson and rise when it's the right time for it? And he says, it's exactly it. So let me break that down. In 1929, what happened? We had a stock market crash, right? And if you look at what happened behind the stock market crash, it was all based on greed. It was based on this idea of materialism. It was based on the idea of more money. It was the base that there was not enough, there was not enough in the world. There was a limited supply, and I'm going to hoard it. And so the system came and it broke down. What happened in 1987? Same thing. What happened in 2008? Same thing. What's going to happen in the near future? Unless consciousness shifts, the same thing's going to happen because we're always going to be getting a turn up of the dial of the pain. Ever been to a chiropractor? And they put this thing on you and it's got electronic electrodes on it, and he turns it up and he's feeding like electric current into the muscle. It causes the muscle to heal. And he says, as he turns it up, can you feel it? Can you feel it? Yeah, I can feel it. Is that too much pain? Yeah, turn it down a little bit. And you turn it down a little bit and you can tolerate it, right? That's what happens when you have this idea of manufactured consent. It's not in your alignment with your values. It's not alignment with your higher truth, but you built up a tolerance for it, and what has to happen? Consciousness is going to zap us right between the eyes until we wake up and make a choice and align ourselves, become our unique selves, and we start to love again. And love means loving God as it is, loving ourselves as we are, loving others as they are. Isn't that cool? When you really break it down, all we are here to do is to freely pursue happiness that is unique to each of us while respecting another's right to pursue happiness in their own unique way, and then seeing the perfection of life and living in gratitude for it, and realize that no matter where we are, we can rise above the consciousness that others may be having. Because as the individualizations of God, we have that ability and we have that power. But as you think about this, as you go forward from today, I'm going to ask you to look at it. When someone's expressing a view to you, are they doing it from manufactured consciousness, intent, or are they really thinking for themselves? More importantly, I would ask that as you go forth today and you start questioning, are you thinking about it from your perspective, your unique perspective? Your unique perspective will not agree 100% with anyone else on the planet because you're unique. But you can accept anyone else on the planet because you respect their uniqueness. John Shelby Spong, retired bishop of the Episcopal faith, one of the greatest authors and scholars of the Bible, says this: Christianity must change or die. And he followed it up with this. This is the best ever. Christianity, love of God, love of others, is the greatest philosophy on the planet that has yet to be practiced. I want to say to you, that practice has begun, because that is the very foundation, it is the purpose of everyone who comes into this spiritual community as Agape. I guarantee you, in this room, there's nothing but a sacred space where you are loved as you are, where you are accepted as you are, where you will be nourished as you are to become your magnificence. You will be never molded into something that you choose not to be. That's a promise from the God in me that is connecting with the God in you. And together, there is only love. Let's go within. I want to thank you for joining us today. I am so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask you to go to our website. Once there, click on the Contribute button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to the world. I would also ask you to please share this message with anyone you feel might benefit. Again, I want to thank you for joining me and the Agape community as together we bring joy to life.